There's a big difference between learning to count while making cookies and instead of learning to count, we're going to bake cookies. Every single situation can provide tons of learning opportunities, but not every single situation will teach academic skills. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jess from the blog SiloandSage.com, and today we are going to dive deep into this topic of interest-led learning, unschooling, this idea of putting aside curriculum in favor of life learning. Now, if you have been around here before, you know I'm a former teacher. I'm a mom of 5 kids. My oldest is a senior in high school this year, but homeschooled. And I am a huge proponent of leaving behind curriculum in favor of life learning and hands-on experiences and learning through books and all of these things. However, we cannot exchange I don't use curriculum and replace it with I don't educate my kids. And unfortunately, that is what I see happening in a lot of circles right now when it comes to unschooling or just kind of putting aside traditional curriculum instead of replacing it with intentional learning opportunities. People are just not educating their kids. Homeschooling requires intentional effort from us as moms, from the parents. We cannot take a back seat to their learning. Now, the intentional effort that you use could look very, very different for me than it does for you. There are so many ways that we can do this. So that effort might look like curating books and learning resources like curriculum or guides or things that you find online, printable resources, things like that. It might look like choosing activities and classes for your kids to join, or creating learning spaces in your home for your kids to get creative and learn on their own, or just having conversations with your kids about any kind of topics that you want to learn about together, or giving your kids any kind of opportunity to do something where they learn something. But homeschooling requires us to be active participants in our kids' education. We cannot take a back seat. We cannot be passive, and we can't just let it happen without being involved and being intentional. Now, here's the part that is often missing. Education is not the same as school. So being intentional doesn't have to mean getting workbooks and worksheets and textbooks and traditional curriculum. How you educate your kids can look so many different ways. And education is more than just those academic skills. It's not just math and history and science and reading. Those are the things that are typically taught in schools. We need all kinds of skills, right? We need life skills, we need interpersonal skills. All of these things are part of a well-rounded education. But we all want our kids to have basic academic skills, right? We all want them to learn how to read. We all want them to be able to count and do math and do their own taxes. But the problem comes in when we classify every single thing as learning and then don't actually get intentional about teaching them those academic skills. So let me give you this example. I was talking with a friend about how sometimes we see in the online space how parents will be like, well, I took my kids to the grocery store today. That was school. Check. Was it? Well, here's the thing. Like I said, education and school are not the same. So it's easy for us as parents to look at that as through the school system mindset and be like, oh, no. That was not school. You absolutely did not teach your kids anything inside the grocery store. Or we could look at it from this life is learning, unschooling perspective, and we could say, oh, absolutely, your kid learned so much at the grocery store. Now, both of those are kind of true because there's more than one way to look at a trip to the grocery store. So we're going to kind of dissect this a little bit. Now, if you go to the grocery store and your kids are counting apples, they're learning about budgeting, this is all academic, right? Writing a grocery list, counting and weighing produce, budgeting for meals, counting out the money to pay for the groceries, all of these things, those are academic skills. And if you go to the grocery store and you are intentionally having your kids do these things, absolutely that grocery store trip counts as school because you're teaching them academic skills, right? Or maybe your older kids are taking, you're kind of like doing a culinary class and they have to pick out all the right produce and they have to plan a menu. That's academic. That is an academic skill. And there are valuable life skills that you can learn at the grocery store, right? You can learn how to behave in public, how to walk properly through the aisles, how to considerately pass people by or say, excuse me, as you kind of reach in front of someone in the aisle. You can have good manners when you're speaking to the cashier and learn how to politely converse with people that you don't actually know and how to ask for help when you need to find something. Now, this is a great place to learn those things, right? The grocery store. That's an excellent place to learn these things. And these are all skills that your kids do need to learn. Are they considered academic skills? No. Can we consider them part of your overall education? Absolutely. But just saying that the grocery store is our quote unquote school for the day, that actually requires some intention on my part as a mom and your part as a mom. Because I want you to picture this scenario, okay? Let's say that you are walking through the grocery store and you have a toddler and a baby and a couple of school-age kids, and you are hustling through that store because you know that any second now your toddler is going to throw a fit, and you do not want this to happen in the middle of the store. So you're kind of like hustling along, come on, stay close to me, and you're just kind of grabbing things as you go, and you do not have any intention involved in educating your kids in this moment besides, please just be quiet, do not throw a fit, stay with me. Now, as parents, we have all been there. We have all had those moments where we're trying to get through our errands or whatever it is, whether it's the grocery store or somewhere else, and you just want to get through it, right? You're just trying to survive that trip through the grocery store. I know when I had 4 tiny children, that was often my intention of the grocery store. It wasn't about learning those life skills, and it certainly was not about counting and weighing produce. This was much more of a learning experience for me about how to just get through the grocery store with 4 tiny children. Now, of course, I'm sure in that situation, you could argue that yes, my kids probably learned something. Maybe they learned how to keep your cool in a hard situation because they watched me. And sure, these are all life skills. But what I want you to see is the intention behind that grocery store trip. Because if we want to say that life is learning, which it is, but if we want to say that, we actually have to be intentional about using those moments as learning opportunities for our kids. This doesn't mean that every single moment of your day has to be a learning opportunity. But if we want to have this mindset of life is learning, we don't want to rely on curriculum, we actually have to be intentional. So when we are baking those cookies, as I talked about before, and we're going to count that as our math lesson, we actually have to be teaching our kids math through baking cookies. And if we're not intentional, they might pick up those things, right? If we're talking about, oh, we're adding a third and we're adding a cup, they might pick up on those things and they might not. And that's fine. Not everything has to be an intentional learning activity. But if we want to say this is how we're teaching our kids math, then we actually have to be teaching our kids math in that moment. We have to intentionally be talking about it. I don't mean that you have to pull out a worksheet that says 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3. You don't have to do that, but you actually have to be talking through it with your kids and helping them to make those connections between what you're doing and what you're trying to teach them. Even if this is a skill that is going to be mastered over time and you're not expecting it to be mastered in that moment, you still have to be intentional. Homeschooling requires us to be intentional. Now, I am a firm believer that as homeschoolers, we need to ditch the school system mindset. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know this is something that I talk about a lot. I am a firm believer in home, not school. We are not trying to recreate school at home. We're not trying to do the same things and teach our kids in the same ways that they're doing it at school. But ditching the school system and the school system mindset cannot mean that we ditch learning and we ditch education. We just have to be intentional about doing it differently. If we're not relying on the school system model, we have to change not only our own thinking, but we have to change our own behaviors and we have to change the way we do things. We cannot be lazy and just expect that our kids are going to learn everything on their own without our intentionality. They will learn some things without us. Absolutely. My kids have learned so many things without me, but we can't expect them to learn everything just through life, just through happenstance. Because quite honestly, this is where we get into the realm of educational neglect, where we are just throwing caution to the wind and just letting the educational chips fall where they may. How many cliches can I throw in one sentence? But we have to be intentional, even if we're not using worksheets, even if we're not using curriculum, even if we're not using the school system way. If I never teach my kids letters, will they actually learn how to read? If I never teach them that the letter B makes the B sound, how are they going to know? Could they pick it up somewhere along the way? Sure, they could. And I have kids who have definitely done that, and they're usually younger siblings. But if I'm just sitting next to my child and I notice letters, like maybe they're looking at a book, and I point out, oh, that's a letter B. B makes the B sound. Can you say B? I don't need to make it a whole lesson, right? But that's just an intentional moment of learning that can happen right then and there in the middle of whatever it is that we're doing. This is what I mean by being intentional. It doesn't always require a lesson plan. It doesn't always require a workbook or a curriculum, but it does require us to be constantly aware of what's happening around us and the ways our kids can be learning. Now, I don't mean, like I said before, that you have to turn every situation and every moment with your kids into a formal learning opportunity, because honestly, that gets kind of old for your kids, right? It's going to get old for them if everything that they do, you're constantly trying to turn into this object lesson and teach them something profound. But if you just look at your life and look at everything you're doing as intentional learning opportunities, when you reframe the way you think about it, you're actually going to have a different perspective on what they're doing. So yes, you will see the moment that you're in the kitchen baking cookies with your kids, you'll see it differently. You'll see it as a time for teaching them fractions or teaching them how to count the scoops of flour out of the bin. You're going to see it as a time to teach them about chemical reactions or whatever it is you want to teach them. And you will see that life is learning. But if you don't have that intentionality and that mindset, you're actually going to miss it. And you can very easily fall into this, well, everything we do is learning and life is learning. We're learning all the time, and never actually teach your kids the skills that they need. Now, I realize that for some of you, especially those of you who feel like you fall in that unschooling category, you might be kind of defensive right now. You might be kind of bristling and being like, I don't really like this. I don't feel comfortable with this because life is learning. And yes, life is learning, but we actually have to be the facilitators of our kids' education. This is what we signed up for as home educators. We signed up to be the ones responsible for their education, for their learning. This doesn't mean you have to get out a curriculum, doesn't mean you have to get out worksheets, but it does mean that you have to actually be engaged in their learning. And you have to step in when you see that they aren't learning their letters or they aren't learning their numbers. You have to step in some way. Even if that means that you are baking cookies every single day until they figure out that 1/3 and 1/3 makes 2/3. If you don't want to do it in a math book, that's fine. But you actually have to do the work alongside your kids and be intentional. Now, whatever kind of homeschooler you think that you are, unschooler, classical, Charlotte Mason, eclectic, interest-led learning, all of these things. It doesn't actually matter, because no matter what kind of homeschooler you are, what kind of philosophy you subscribe to, you still have to be intentional. You have to be intentional, and you have to be responsible for your child's education. That means at the end of the day, if your child isn't learning how to read, it's up to you to figure out, what can I do to support my child in teaching them how to read? Now, that doesn't mean you have to teach them how to read at 5, but that's a conversation for another day. And if you want to know more about that, I do have some other videos that I will link for you that will help you with that situation. But it is ultimately our responsibility when we sign up to be homeschool moms, to be home educators. We are taking that responsibility on, and that means we need to put in the work, we need to put in the effort, and we need to be intentional. Now, I could go on and on and on about this, but I actually have an entire course that's called Homeschool the Non-School Way that's all about this. All about how you can ditch the school system mindset, but still teach your kids and be intentional about learning them just in a way that doesn't look like school. I actually have a free workshop called 3 Secrets to Homeschooling Without School that will really help you to kind of like tune in your mindset and your intention around this whole idea. So you can go to siloandsage.com/workshops, and I'll put the link below, and you can check that out totally free. Or you can also check out my course, Homeschool the Non-School Way, if you want a little more hand-holding, a little bit more support. You can check that out in the link below as well. Now, if you liked this video, you will love this video about my journey with curriculum and unschooling and how I kind of have worked through this process for myself as a former teacher and with my 5 kids that I've been homeschooling since the beginning. So I will link that video right here, and you can check it out. I will see you soon in another video, and in the meantime, keep cultivating your home friends. Bye!